Welcome back to the Remedial Film Class Podcast. I'm your host, Dan.
And I'm Travis.
And I'm George.
And this is going to be the least sexy threesome any of us deal with for the next few minutes. Guys, we watched Wild Things.
Yes, we did.
I mean, did you finish it, George?
Well, I was going to say, two of us watched Wild Things, and one of us watched most of it.
The scene that's on the screen, I don't know.
Let me, hold on.
He left
I
it
paused the movie.
That's kind of gross.
Yes.
With people over? George.
No,
yeah.
It's the recovery of the teeth on the beach scene. That's where he's at.
Oh, that's a weird scene to pause it on, but I mean, different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
It wasn't the pool scene.
No. So I stopped the movie at 29 minutes in, and I said to my wife, at what point do I just walk away from this movie and tell the guys that I just couldn't take another minute of it?
Coming from the guy who sat through all 13 Friday the 13th movies.
That moment happened 48 minutes later. Well, yeah, 48 minutes later. I'm an hour and 17 minutes and 50 seconds in when I pressed pause, and I said, no more.
It starts getting good around an hour 20.
When the credits roll and you're like, oh, these actors, I know them.
When everything comes to light that you have skipped.
Yeah, the stuff that you don't know happens, and then you're like, oh, stuff happened, and I didn't know it because I didn't watch it to the end.
Yeah. Well, tell me how it ended.
So, by no means is this the worst movie we've showed you out of 90-something movies.
Which one was the worst?
I mean, you made it through Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Yeah.
Which is a cult classic, but not... It's a movie that you watch almost ironically.
A scene from Silent Night, Deadly Night 2.
That was...
the garbage day scene.
That was a great scene. What are you talking about?
So, it doesn't really work, this format, if you don't finish the movies.
Wait, dude, it's another, 30 minutes of my life. When you can explain to me what happened in the next 30 seconds, like in the next 30 minutes, in the next 30 seconds, I'm just going to go with the 30 seconds option at this point.
I don't think we're going to tell you what happens. I think we'll talk about the movie that you've seen so far, and we'll talk about the context this movie exists in, but we're not going to spoil the ending for you. That's against our code.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Their code.
There are rules.
It's a sick joke.
You guys and your code.
Your code.
You guys are a bunch of schemers.
Schemers. Well, I mean, you got a very much older Kevin Bacon.
Now, do you know who Kevin Bacon is? George?
Yeah, I'm familiar with.
Did you recognize him being in this movie? Did you go, oh, that fellow there, that is Kevin Bacon?
I did.
Kevin Bacon.
Okay.
I did.
So that's one. You got one.
I first saw him in A Few Good Men, and I saw him get what was an arrow through his chest or
arrow through the neck.
The spear through the chest
in Friday the 13th.
Classic Friday the 13th.
And I've seen him in some other things too. Yeah, I recognize him for sure.
Okay.
He's a national treasure.
Now,
I tend to agree.
Yes.
Did you recognize the character Susie? The kind of we call her
mother?
maybe like a. You don't want to say trailer park, but you know.
Oh, yeah.
Rough
She's
around the edges, goth
swamp.
girl.
The swamp girl.
Do you recognize her?
The backwoods girl.
Do I recognize her?
The Gator Farm.
She reminds me of the
How's
daughter
that?
from American Beauty, but I don't know if it's the same actor.
Not even close. No. But she is the lead in Scream, one of your favorite movies from this
She's
show.
Sydney.
Oh, okay.
She's the main girl.
They tried really hard to make her look hard, and it's just impossible. She's always Neve Campbell, always. She's never going to be anything else than Sydney.
No, worked on me.
Worked on you.
But I ain't seen shit, so.
But you were already done before they probably even showed her. Because I know when I texted Dan last night, it was around the scene where Sam, who's Matt Dillon, drives Denise Richards home with the kid with the bike in the back, and the mom comes out on the balcony.
Mm-hmm.
And every time the mom talked, I wanted to eject the DVD. So
yes.
I feel it. I know. She was terrible.
Now, the mom,
really
you're
bad.
referring to Teresa Russell.
Teresa Russell.
National treasure and very well-regarded actress, Teresa Russell.
Yes, but not in this movie.
Voice of Anne in the English dub of Tenebrae, so eventually you'll hear her voice again.
She was actually big in these kind of movies before she hit her later years, which is this movie. But like, she did a movie called Black Widow and stuff where she was like the Sharon Stone type character from Basic Instinct. She was like the femme fatale kind of character.
She's in this movie because she's like a sexy lady emeritus.
Okay. She fits the part well, but her delivery of lines were very soap opera-ish, which was like, oh.
I mean, not just that character. The delivery of lines in this entire movie is very soap opera-ish.
Most of the guys were fine, but Denise Richards was bad. Nev Campbell was...
What's the guidance counselor's name?
Matt Dillon.
Yeah, but the character's name.
Sam.
Lombardo.
Yeah, Mr. Lombardo.
You thought he was good?
He's Matt Dillon.
Who's Matt Dillon?
He's kind of a legend, a Hollywood legend.
Is he?
Of the 80s, yeah.
How?
He's part of the Brat Pack, the Patrick Swayze, Rob Lowe, Ali Sheedy, Outsiders.
I didn't know that a Brat Pack was a thing.
Yeah.
That's the first time I've ever heard of it.
We'll probably go into that at some point.
Rob Lowe, I have seen in a few things.
Yes.
And I tend to like Rob Lowe.
Matt Dillon, he was in Something About Mary, which you did see.
I have seen that, but I don't recall.
He's the private investigator that
okay.
What's his name? Holy shit.
Ben Stiller?
Ben Stiller hires to go track her down. And then he winds up sabotaging the whole thing.
He's the one who asks how he got the beans above the Frank. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's the cop. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, he's been around a while. He's done a lot of movies.
How did he get the beans above the Frank?
I don't know.
Anyways.
Never had that problem.
Okay, well, I didn't really care for him. But what do I know?
Again, when we watched Basic Instinct, we talked about that movie had no business being successful. But no one gave the memo to Michael Douglas. And
the actors.
The actors were like,
and actresses.
Oh, wait, no, we're making a movie. And they were basically making this kind of movie, which is a Cinemax movie, a late night HBO movie. And they made a pretty good movie. So this is kind of that same genre, that, that not murder mystery, but like...
It's like a sexy noir
thriller, I guess.
kind of.
Seductive thriller noir. Just not as well done.
Now, did you recognize the attorney with the neck brace?
Of course. I mean, when he came on the screen, I was like, "Oh, thank God, an actor."
My text to Dan last night was, not even tits and Bill Murray saves this.
That's true. That's 100% true.
It's become a weekly tradition for Travis to text me the night before we record saying we shouldn't watch the movie that we're watching this week. Even though he always helps me pick the movies, it's just...
No, I was on board for this movie when we were talking about Basic Instinct, because it does fall in that same genre. So, yeah, and I remember this being better. I do remember it being better. I think it came out like 96, 97, I think.
96 is what it said.
And I was working at the theater, so I did see certain scenes many times.
It's 98. I don't know why it would have said 96.
Or 98.
But
that's right, 98. I stopped working there in 99, so this was in the theater.
It's it's 1998, Trev, like I said.
98.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I remember watching. This is the kind of movie where you just kind of skip scenes.
Oh.
You don't really
Now you tell me.
You can't. I watched it all the way through once. Last night was the first time I watched, the second time I ever watched it all the way through. It's no My Cousin Vinny where when you're flicking through the channels and Wild Things is on and you're like, oh, I got to watch the rest of this.
No.
Or, oh, I need to see the next part. It's more like, oh, I have this on DVD. Let me pop it in and go to the 4 or 5 scenes I want to watch and then not watch it again for 10 years. That's what that kind of movie is.
I feel you.
But I liked Kevin Bacon in this movie.
He was trying.
Yeah,
he was acting his ass off, but no one around him was.
His partner was like a block of wood. Like she's like, yeah. Bill Murray was trying.
And then
Bill
Murray was good though, but he kind of just didn't fit what the rest of the movie was doing because he's Bill Murray and he just takes over.
He's the comic
every part that he's in. So like I'm watching it thinking, oh my God, I could use a lot more Bill Murray in this movie. Can we make a movie about like Bill Murray
that character? Yeah,
like it's almost like 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 you could do like a Better Call Saul, but about this attorney.
Yeah,
and
like
that would be
what
hilarious.
Are the other cases he's dealing with?
Yes, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
But he was funny in a movie that's not supposed to be funny,
right?
And lovable in a movie that's not supposed to be like that. And so he just didn't. His character didn't fit for me, and it kind of just was like weird.
Right.
But I liked him. Like it's like one of a couple of the parts of the movie that I liked was Bill Murray's stuff. But
now, George, are you familiar? And Travis, you might be familiar with this too. Have you ever heard of something called the Expert Fallacy?
I've heard of it.
We've talked a lot on this show about the Dunning-Kruger effect, and we've talked about recency bias a little bit, but we haven't talked about the expert fallacy. But I thought tonight might be a good time to bring it up. I meant to bring it up during, I think it was Friday 7, Friday 8, and then lo and behold, a full year and a half later, I finally bring it up. George, expert fallacy. Ever heard of it?
I think I've heard of it in a different form. I think it's the appeal to authority.
Explain the appeal to authority.
Like, this is true. This has to be the way it is because this expert says that's the way it is.
No.
And that's not necessarily the case.
Not the thing. Different thing.
Okay.
So the expert fallacy, I'll just tell you what it is. We'll see if we can catch on to why.
Is that the shower scene towards the end?
Quite a bit, George, you know quite a bit about electricity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from what I understand, you came to understand all these things about electricity kind of self-motivated of your own accord, right? You're a self-made man.
I started as a tinkerer, but I got more involved when I surrounded myself with people who knew more than me.
So would you consider yourself to be an expert or an aspiring expert in the field of electricity?
Aspiring? Sure, yeah.
Yeah. And you play guitar. I know that. And you know a whole lot about tone. Would you consider yourself to be pretty well-versed in the natures of tone? Dare I say, to a new lay person, would you be considered an expert in guitar tone?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. So here's the thing about George. George knows a lot about electricity and guitars. The thing about the expert fallacy is a person who knows that they have an expertise in one field sometimes, potentially, could fallaciously fall into a trap to think that I am an expert in electricity and I am an expert in guitar tone. So I'm also an expert in all the other things I deal with. That's the expert fallacy. It's you'll see it a lot with engineers. Those are the worst. Sorry, engineers. But you work in a world in which problems have solutions, and those solutions are derived from your understanding of math and engineering and physics. And suddenly, all the problems in the world start to look like things that can be solved through your expertise
through math and physics.
In math and physics and engineering. So the reason I bring this up, George, the expert fallacy, the movie you watched part of tonight does not fall into any category that we've ever really looked at on this show. And so I'm worried, I am afraid that the George who watched this movie an hour ago looked at this movie through a lens of understanding 100 and something movies that you've seen. And from that criteria, you judge that the movie was bad from the very beginning. And we're talking about a movie that definitely doesn't fall into any of the categories we've talked about before. It shares a lot in common with Basic Instinct because it's kind of sexy. But it also pulls from multiple traditions you haven't seen yet. You haven't seen a lot of noir. You haven't seen a lot of this kind of, I don't want to say cheese ball, but that is the first word that comes to mind. Kind of like good-natured, bad-spirited filmmaking, right? Bad people doing awful things, but like not feeling bad about it. It lacks the darkness of a Basic Instinct, right? A menace. Like everybody in this movie is doing bad things, but you don't have an evil, conniving, murderous, like femme fatale or main bad guy. You know, there's no Riddler or Joker behind the scenes. There's no Sharon Stone character from Basic Instinct.
Everybody's shitty.
Everybody is kind of playing in this muck. It's like, I'm trying to think of anything we've even come close to where everybody has the dirt on them, you know? And it doesn't matter how clean they start, and it doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean, it does. It pulls like from traditions like the Agatha Christie style stuff, only like, I don't know. This is like a much more relaxed version of an Agatha Christie type thing. It's not as like highbrow. But it knows it's not highbrow. I've seen other
things like that. You know, like where everyone's shitty and even the good guys are shitty.
But see, a lot of those movies where everybody is shitty, but even the good guys, they play them in Hollywood as like hard-boiled, like anti-heroes, right? Like, oh, he's the Punisher, and yeah, he's going to murder a bunch of people, but he's going to murder the right people, and he's going to come out darker because he played in the darkness. Like,
I'm thinking more, I mean, I just recently watched True Detective Season 1. And those detectives they were kind of like forced into a situation where they're both good dudes, but they had to lie to make things right.
They played in the darkness long enough that they got the darkness on and in them.
Yeah. Got a little darkness on you.
But it's played. Those movies in True Detective is a great example of one that is played like deadly serious, unfunly serious. Like I'm trying to think of a single time I laughed during True Detective. You know? This is not that. Wild Things is a much more relaxed kind of like a popcorn flick. Just instead of cars crashing into each other, it's human bodies crashing into each other in multiple configurations. So it's a shame you didn't finish it. It's a shame you gave up when you did, because this movie does a lot of things that you actually, I think, would appreciate. Some of them we won't be able to talk about.
And you missed out on Kevin Bacon's Little Bacon.
Oh, yeah, you get to see his dick. You missed out, man. Spoiler alert. It's Kevin Bacon's dick.
Great.
6 degrees of Kevin Bacon's dick.
I mean, more like, I don't know, 45 degrees.
Yeah.
If we're being honest. But
he's a little teapot. Short. Here's his handle. Here's his spout.
Now, last week, we got into a discussion that I'm hoping now, maybe, George, you realize why we had that 10-minute discussion about film nudity at the end of the last episode to kind of prep you for today's episode. One thing that you talked about was how you liked, and I think your word was the mystery, or maybe that was Travis's word, but the idea that, you know, nudity in these movies is more rare in America, and you like nudity rare because you want it to be special. Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah.
Denise Richards, Kelly in this movie, is nude a few times in this movie in a few different scenes. She had already been in Starship Troopers, which is, whether it's good or whether it's bad doesn't matter. It was a big movie that made a lot of money. This was her second big movie.
It's good.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
But if we say it's good and then you get in there and you're like, oh, I don't get the it's RoboCop again. No,
Yeah, no.
It could go badly. But it's a good flick. But anyway, she's in a good flick. She's in this, her second big movie. She's nude all over the place. Never really nude in a movie again. This is the one time that she does this kind of stuff, and it puts her into such a position that she ends up a Bond girl, like the next year.
And Charlie Sheen's wife.
And she's done like 100 movies.
But Neve Campbell falls on the category that I was talking about, where she clearly has signed multiple nudity clauses in her contracts where she's not showing anything, but it's always implied.
Right.
She does it in Scream. She does it in here. And it's like, it's almost, you're disappointed, which is what I was talking about. Like you're saying, okay, she's in a, not a titty movie, but it's not like it's Spring Break, but it's clearly a movie that's going to have nudity. They imply it in the trailer. So you go to the movie thinking you're going to see something.
Yes, and what you get is the near occasion of nudity.
You get Kevin Bacon's penis.
That
was not in the trailer.
That is
it's a bait and switch.
That's a bait and switch if I ever. Is this the movie you were talking about where you saw Dick instead of?
Yes.
Yeah.
When we were doing Scream, I brought this movie up because it was not fair.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, I'm finally gonna see.
Yeah. I remember.
She's that, and then
I
boom,
remember
Kevin
that
Bacon's
conversation. Yeah. And you were pissed.
And I remember Denise Richards in Starship Troopers was the one in the movie that did not show herself naked, but Dina Meyer did. They did like a whole trooper shower scene where the girls and guys were showering together, but Richards was not in that room. So it was like when you finally you're like, wow. And it's funny how they over-sexualized her in this movie, but they didn't have to. Like she's sexy. She could have been in a turtleneck or even a t-shirt and jeans. She didn't have to be like the Jessica Rabbit, seductive. Like she's seductive just being in the room.
But and I have to jump in here.
So they overplayed that a little bit.
They overplayed it because that is the character she's playing.
Exactly. Right.
And it's necessary to the plot that George knows and the stuff that George doesn't know because he gave up on the movie too soon. It's important that she be exactly what she is in this movie.
Yes.
So, George, this is exactly kind of the movie that normally, if you had greater context for, Denise Richards' career, you'd be like, oh, wow, this is the one time she really went all out. And if you wonder, if you better appreciated what they were going for as far as this movie was going, as far as the, craptacular on-purpose acting, which there's a lot of explanations to why some of this acting is kind of questionable in the first half of this movie, and it has to do with the plot, not just the production. But again, we'll leave that unsaid.
Well, I'm glad I didn't get to see Kevin Bacon's dick. Be quite honest with you.
I mean, it's not in your face, but it is there.
I hope not.
You get pickle. You don't get angry pickle.
You get semi-angry pickle. You get shower pickle.
Do you know that this movie is more popular on IMDb than Halloween?
Really?
Yeah. It's not higher rated, but it is a much more popular search than Halloween. So I just think that's interesting. It's an interesting thing. The director of this movie, also interesting, because I know him mostly from Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer,
right?
Which is the grim, dark slasher movie. Like, if you want to talk about the slasher movie that is as close to True Detective in tone as possible, Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer is that. And so for him to turn around and make a movie like this that is kind of lighthearted, tongue-in-cheek in a lot of ways,
right?
It's a really interesting tonal shift. I wouldn't have expected it to be the same guy. So, George, this is a movie that, had you gone to a school with other children your age, you would have been very familiar with this movie in 1998 and 99.
Okay.
This movie hit at a time where bigger budget mainstream Hollywood movies were just about to stop being sexy. This was like the last run of mainstream, big budget, sexy movies before horror and all these movies were PG-13 and superheroes were starting to take over the box office. Like, this is kind of the last bit of this. We've got Eyes Wide Shut and this and a couple others in the same era.
What year was American Pie? Was that 2000?
It had to be like 98, 99. 99, yeah. So,
yeah, because you had like Road Trip and all those like comedies, sex comedies that still existed.
Yeah, there was like a resurgence of 80s sex comedies, and then that was kind of the door shutting on a lot of this stuff, which is interesting. But, we've talked about pay cable TV and stuff kind of picking up the back end.
I'm sure people rented the hell out of this movie.
This is we talked about last week, that Pen 15 show has an entire episode about when they saw this movie at a sleepover.
Right.
And that was what this movie became. It was like a yardstick for how your weekend had gone, to hear all the different people that had managed to rent it, find it on demand in the early days of on-demand cable. Like, it made the idea of a three-way like mainstream for a whole generation of people who had never seen that in the movie.
Right. What was the movie with Gina Gershon? Was it Crash?
Bound?
Or Bound? Yeah, that was probably around the same time too, because that was, everybody talked about her and Tilly, Meg Tilly.
And what's funny about Bound is Wachowski siblings made that one.
Yeah.
That's not one that I'd ever heard of. Like, that one didn't make it down to the middle school crowd. That was too adult.
Gotcha.
But Wild Things, everybody middle school knew about Wild Things, and a lot of it was marketing, and a lot of it was the fact that it was this, super raunchy but like acceptable because it's made by mainstream Hollywood.
Plus, it was Neve Campbell. You get the Party of Five, and Scream.
Yeah.
Connection to your generation. So I get it.
Now, an interesting thing in this uptight America that we live in, harkening back to our discussion last week, one of the things that's interesting about the way that America works with sexual topics, if it pops up in a magazine, especially like an adult magazine, it still feels kind of forbidden, right? In the 80s. I'm saying right, you don't have to agree with me, but I'm going to put this out there. But there's something about when a topic like the sex in Wild Things jumps from your late night cable, direct to video, made for people to watch by themselves in their home, Cinemax type movies. When it jumps from that to a mainstream theatrical Hollywood movie, that like there's this phenomena where suddenly people that would never have watched that scene because it was in a dirty movie, be it on cable or be it at a video store, they wouldn't watch a dirty movie because dirty movies are bad. But when it happens in this movie made by a mainstream producer and director, suddenly it's like, ooh, have you seen? Let's all talk about it, because now it's like safe to talk about it. I've seen the same thing happen recently with the 50 Shades a few years ago when those books were flying around. People that would never feel comfortable admitting to, or even privately in their own home, viewing something for sexual gratification. Suddenly, we're like, oh, but this isn't a dirty book. Or in the case of the movies they made, this isn't a dirty movie. Instead, this is a mainstream movie. So I'll like talk about it at work and share the book with my coworkers, and we'll all go see the movie when it comes out. When in reality, what they're watching is essentially softcore porn, and what they're reading is like bondage porn, right? Isn't that the one where it's kind of bondagey?
Yeah.
Like, that's not something you'd ever see in a mainstream movie unless it was.
I don't think 50 Shades of Grey was considered as mainstream. Yeah, the books were popular, And it became a topic of conversation because everybody was like, well, everybody's kind of in the closet about S&M and porn and this and that, but that book sold like 80 million copies or something, so it's like it's not just a man thing.
No, it's not men.
There's a lot of women buying
that
these
one.
books.
That was an interesting one because it was mainly aimed toward women.
No, it definitely rode the coattails of like the Sex and the City viewers. Like you said, they went out to dinner, then they went to see the movie as like a group. It was an event, which is weird for that kind of movie because it's like you said, it's a Cinemax movie. It's Red Shoe Diaries. It's not mainstream.
So and that's this phenomena with Wild Things where it's like this is a movie that has content in it that if you led with this content in the same way that Wild Things did, but you were advertising your direct to video, your direct to cable late night movie, not as many people would watch it. And the ones that did watch it, a lot of them would never admit to watching it. But because it's like got this seal of approval of a commercial release and stays away from the NC-17 rating, right? Like that's the one example I can think of really off the top of my head is the Showgirls thing where people still treated it like a dirty movie because it had the wrong rating on it, which is bizarre.
But from what I was saying, if What's Her Name is not in that movie, no one goes to see that show. No one sees it.
Nobody sees Showgirls if it doesn't have...
Elizabeth Berkley in that movie is what made people curious. Same thing with Striptease. No one was seeing Striptease. They weren't paying their $12 to see, or probably $8 at that point, to see Striptease. They were going to see Demi Moore be a stripper. That to me, that's the way I look at it, because Showgirls was so bad that there's no word of mouth for that movie at all. But you're seeing the girl from Saved by the Bell. That's not the one that most of the people wanted to see.
So next week, I think we should watch a Paul Verhoeven flick from the mid-90s.
No.
I don't know, man. Like, you guys are talking a lot about how like sexual this movie is and all that. And,
for its time, it was.
Okay, fine. The first hour and 17 minutes of it, to me, guys, nothing special.
No, but again,
probably because I don't know who they are. But then again, I didn't know who Sharon Stone was when I watched that movie, Basic Instinct. And I thought it was very
that movie
sexual.
Was way sexual, way more than this.
Yeah,
definitely.
So
you needed the sexual incidents in this movie to set up the plot.
Yeah,
but it wasn't a softcore where it was like, oh, they're just gonna meet up and do it. Oh, look, they're meeting here and doing it. Like it wasn't part of the plot. They just needed that first establishment and then the second scene to show those two were kind of in cahoots.
Yeah. Well, kind of. Yeah, they were.
They were. So they had to show that. But other than that, it's really not relevant to this movie at all.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that bad. Or I shouldn't say bad.
But for the 90s, this kind of movie, you had to sit up 2:00 in the morning on Cinemax. And it was usually like this really terrible, like, sex crime movie where there's some nudity and the acting's terrible, but whatever. This was in the movie theater. Like, you paid money to go see it. So it was way more mainstream.
Okay. Didn't hit me the same way Basic Instinct did.
It's a different movie.
At all.
A different kind of movie, yeah.
It's a different genre. It is just like Basic Instinct. There is a before Wild Things and there is an after Wild Things as far as how some of these sexual topics are handled in movies and what is expected and what is accepted. The next year you have Cruel Intentions pop up, which I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but again, you have famous actresses making out in a movie, and it's like mainstream now. It's not hidden from view. It is like advertised on TV, and they're winning awards on like that MTV Movie Awards thing they got nominated for. And so
yeah, Best Kiss.
Yeah, you don't see lesbian kissing on TV in the 90s, and you definitely don't see passionate women kissing until Wild Things, Cruel Intentions, and now it's a thing. And now it's a thing, right? Like, it's not a shock anymore. And, you know, the past 20-something years have been a lot more, you know, varied and open in the presentations of stuff like that. But it was shocking.
Who was it
in the 90s?
Who was it, like Madonna and Christina Aguilera or something like that at one of the music awards?
Yeah. That was kind of taboo too.
Well, and that was
I remember that happening.
And Britney Spears. It was Britney Spears.
Yeah, was it Britney Spears or what? Okay.
She kissed one, then kissed the other.
And that was a lot more just performative, right?
Yeah.
Like there was no passion there. It was just shock value.
Right.
And shock value is one thing. But, you know, this movie, Cruel Intentions, there was like an acted passion there that like would not have been kosher up until that point. It was that alone, like the acting itself would be surprising, and now it's like a commonplace thing, and it's just interesting that this was the turn. Just boom, right there in the late 90s.
I like Cruel Intentions. That was better than this.
I don't know if I've seen it all the way through.
But yeah, it's a lot of early actors in that movie. That became something.
Now, one other thing that I think is interesting is you've both discussed like the anticipation of waiting for, you know, an actress to do 20 movies, and will she ever do a sexy movie? And it's interesting here that, you know, Denise Richards is essentially an unknown, but just what they put of her in the advertisements is what brought a lot of people into this theater.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting thing where it's like, it's not about waiting and knowing and hoping that someday, and instead it was just like their marketing of her brought people in and put butts in seats. Now, one thing we haven't discussed, and I was hoping it would come up organically, but it didn't. George, what city does this movie take place in? What area of the country? What
That's
state?
a good question.
They talk about it quite a bit. They show a lot of scenery. There's some gators.
Oh, I saw a license plate that said Florida.
Okay, so this movie takes place in South Florida, essentially Miami.
Okay.
The thing about this movie, it does not look like the Miami that you would see in like a Michael Bay movie. And I think it's amazing and kind of interesting because what you're seeing in this movie is like towny Miami.
Mm-hmm.
And that's weird because you never see that in a movie.
That's another True Detective thing.
It's not the touristy part. It's the living in part.
Yeah, it's like
it was Gainesville.
backwoods,
Gainesville,
like
I think.
yeah.
True Detective was in. It was very, very southern, not urban.
And
that way.
There's a major
Rural.
class element in this movie that
Yeah.
plays through the whole thing. It's like interwoven in the fabric, more so even probably than the sexy stuff. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Gainesville was a town from Devil's Advocate as well.
Yeah.
It's a very popular town.
lot of devils in Gainesville.
Oh, no, wait. No, Devil's Advocate was Gainesville. What was True Detective?
Jacksonville?
Maybe I'm wrong about that.
I feel like True Detective was in Louisiana.
I'm wrong about that.
Am I wrong about that? It's been a while since I watched it. I felt like
True Detective was, it was Louisiana.
Missouri.
It was definitely Louisiana, True Detective. Sorry. My bad.
Not Missouri.
It was another state
The hell am I
over.
talking about?
My bad.
But an interesting class struggle. I mean, not quite die-hard level of working man always right, white-collar guy always wrong. But definitely, you know, a predatory relationship of the rich folks and their, like, stranglehold on this small community and all that. And, like, I thought it was interesting how much the country club became, like, the sign of who had made it and who was getting kicked out and who was back. And, you know, like, the currency of that town was all in the elbow rubbing with the rich people.
It reminded me a lot of the TV show Outer Banks that my son made me watch.
I've never heard of that one.
Classism. They had almost like a West Side Story kind of thing with the rich and then the people that lived on the beach, like the high elites, and then you had the people that kind of the beach home people. And it's kind of the same thing with this. Is when they show you the Gator family, and then they show you the Teresa Russell family or Kelly's family. It's like apples and oranges. So it's definitely an an elitism that goes on there. Makes them all shitty.
Everybody's got a little dirt on them down in the Everglades. And now they have Tyreek Hill. And he's causing all sorts of trouble. So good luck to Miami.
Yeah, wasn't it hilarious that all of the of Bill Murray's clients all wore neck braces in their pictures?
It establishes that
ambulance.
It establishes his entire history without having to say a word, man.
Yeah, it's really good.
Ambulance chaser.
Why are you wearing that neck brace? There was this insurance guy walking around. I don't have to wear it all the time. Just there was an insurance guy walking around.
He reminded me like a mix of Venkman from Ghostbusters and like Bob from What About Bob?
Yeah.
With a little Lionel
very
Hutz
aloof.
thrown in.
Yeah.
Like a lot of Lionel Hutz, but like successful mostly. I mean, George doesn't know what happened at the end, but we'll just leave that to mystery, right?
I couldn't imagine sitting through an hour and a half of this movie and missing the last 10 minutes.
I know, it's really funny.
And no, he doesn't wake up in a hospital. It didn't happen.
No, he wakes up in a hospital and then walks out, and then that girl's there, and she's like, "Hey, it's the beginning of the movie again." And then the credits roll to "I Got You, Babe."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, actually, no, he's not like Bob from What About Bob. He is like that character from Groundhog Day, definitely, in this movie.
Quite a bit, actually.
Holy crap. He's so good. He is a national
Bill
treasure.
Murray?
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
How do you have a movie with like 3 national treasures in it and it's still not a good movie?
It's a fine movie. It's just not like
it doesn't hold up. Let's put it that way.
It's like,
but it kind of does. After talking to you, I get it more.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, right? We had this discussion in the car today, me and the kids. Right? I was like, "Hey, kids, do you want to get really into soccer soon? Because MLS has a new TV deal, and the Royals are terrible, and we have a decent sometimes soccer team. So like, during the off season when football's over, we can watch soccer." And my youngest boy goes, "Baseball boring, soccer boring, football fun." And I'm like, "Okay, so but like, they're different things. We could enjoy both the things." And they decided
he's not
no.
wrong.
He's not.
He's
wrong.
not wrong.
I have that argument with Gabe almost every night when he wants to put on the Phillies game.
Although I do like baseball, but
it's just boring to me.
Well,
I
it
love
is boring.
baseball if I go to the game.
It could be boring, and you can still enjoy the festivity of watching baseball. And that's the thing with this movie. Like, it isn't going to deliver the thrills of a Basic Instinct, and it's not going to deliver on some of the promises it made in the trailer as far as the sexual content. But if you can enjoy it for what it's doing, it's a fun little, weird little movie that does some very interesting things in the third act. Whether or not they all land, I wouldn't comment until George can discuss it too, but it's just a different movie, guys. And so that's the concern. Going forward, George, you don't know all the molds yet, right? Like, sometimes it may not seem like the movie's working, but finish it. Take a step back.
Would you like Usual Suspects if you didn't know who Kaiser Soze was?
I loved that movie.
Would you like
when I didn't know who Kaiser Soze was?
Would you like 7 if you didn't see the car ride to the box? Or the box?
I don't know. I mean, think about it.
You wouldn't even know what what's in the box means.
You think about it.
We've never heard it.
7, you watch 7 and it's rolling, it's unfolding in a way where I want to watch it to the end.
Right.
And this movie is unfolding in a way where I don't want to watch another minute. So why do we watch movies?
Right. To be entertained.
I mean, well, that's one reason. I mean, you could watch movies for,
a podcast.
For education purposes, right? There's that. It has to have some value, right, in order to be worth your time. And I mean, shit, guys. I went 48 minutes longer than I wanted to.
First time ever, right, Meg? Hey.
Hey-o.
And guys, I was like, there's 30 minutes more?
Yeah.
Why am I doing this to myself?
Well, you would have found out. I mean, I would put it a different way from how Travis framed it. I would say, yes, you enjoyed the process of watching 7, but imagine if you hadn't seen the last 20 minutes of 7.
Or Psycho.
Or you hadn't seen the reveal in Psycho. Like, yes, you may have enjoyed the process of watching those movies more.
What if I hadn't seen the reveal in The Village? It might have been a better
movie. You're right.
Right?
No, you're right.
So maybe I made the right decision, guys, is all I'm saying. I mean, this is unprecedented.
It is.
In almost 100 movies, I've watched every single one, no matter how bad.
I mean, you got through Jason 9.
Yeah, you made it through Jason X.
I knew
Jason
I was watching.
X.
I don't even watch Jason X. Like, I'll watch all of them.
I was watching garbage, and I knew I was watching garbage, and it was 80 minutes of garbage.
Right.
This was 120 minutes of garbage. And
today was garbage.
It was garbage posing as a real movie, whereas Jason X is garbage, not posing as anything but garbage. This is garbage posing as a movie.
Right.
It's not. I mean, listen. I didn't watch the whole thing. I'm not going to. I don't give a fuck how it ends. Honestly, I really don't. And I don't want to see what's his name's cock either. So, what are we watching next week?
Oh man! Oh man!
What are we watching next week? I vote for the Verhoeven movie.
No.
I've enjoyed some Verhoeven in the past.
I'm not watching Showgirls. You can watch it on your own time.
Oh.
I'm not doing it.
We'll watch Showgirls at some point just for fun.
Okay.
But aren't you intrigued
shits and giggles.
now that you know, George, that it's a Verhoeven movie? Don't you want to know what's going on?
I mean, after Travis's endorsement of it 20 minutes ago, no.
It's an event. It's definitely an event. But it's not a good movie. It's definitely fun. It's definitely got some stuff going on. There are some performances in this movie.
It might be a better movie to watch with a few friends while enjoying some adult beverages and a laugh, more than like a critical.
It's not to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Although it takes itself seriously.
Oh my God, it so does. It's wonderful. It really thinks it's the best movie, and I don't know how that happened because Verhoeven is consistently one of the best directors I've seen, but man.
It's like an Ed Wood movie. Like Ed Wood thought he was making Oscar award-winning movies.
It's wonderful.
It's not.
Highly recommended. Anybody that hasn't seen Showgirls to watch it. Just don't take it as seriously as it takes itself.
Yes. I'm torn between True Lies or Primal Fear. That's where I'm at. Have you ever seen Primal Fear?
I have not seen Primal Fear.
Okay. Crazy. It was on TV last night when this was on TV last night.
Oh, that is weird.
It was weird.
You didn't shut this off and watch that?
No, it came on right after.
Oh, cool.
And I'm like, and I looked at I think it was like a 66 popcorn and like a 55 critic for Wild Things. And I think Primal Fear was like a 83 and a 89. So it's definitely a better movie than this. But it's a different kind of movie.
Well, what are we doing? Are we doing Primal Fear or are we doing True Lies?
Let's do Primal Fear.
We've been threatening to do True Lies for a while.
Maybe that's our 100.
Well, anyways, you guys are the...
Let's do Primal Fear. I want to see it.
I want to do Primal Fear.
I don't know what it is. I don't know anything about it. You've brought it up a bunch. It better not suck.
I'm sure it will.
Probably will.
It can't. It can't. There are no dream worlds, so I think we're good there.
Then we'll be good.
And there's no time travel, so we're good there.
And no murdering of children needlessly, because I really don't like that.
There's no murdering of children needlessly.
Okay.
Are there
good enough?
Are there made up medical conditions that are pronounced incorrectly?
Oh God.
I don't know.
Are there
I don't know. There's a lot of good people in this movie.
Are there circuit board washcloths involved?
No, and there's no like weird robots that walk really slow and have guitar circuit boards for faces.
Westworld rocked, man. You watch your mouth.
I wasn't sure what you were referencing. Yeah, Westworld. What was the?
I was talking about Jurassic
What was
Park.
the robot in RoboCop? RD something or other.
Ed 209.
Ed 209.
Yeah.
Can't maneuver steps very well.
Ed
But neither
209.
could
Ed
RoboCop.
209.
So
And whimpers like a dog, which is kind of cool. I think you need to revisit RoboCop. Maybe that's our 100.
that really should be our 100.
Dude, I'm on board with RoboCop now.
But maybe we should do Starship Troopers and RoboCop. That way you can get the full propaganda feel of what Verhoeven was doing.
But if we
Okay.
do
Without
Starship
watching
Troopers, we
Showgirls.
have to do Showgirls. That's my requirement.
Fuck.
Well, let's do Primal Fear and see where we end up next week.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thanks, listeners. Peace out.
Peace.
Can they spoil this movie for you, George?
I don't blame any of the listeners if they shut this off 3/4 of the way through a recording of our podcast. I don't blame you.
I almost
And
want to
you know
get
what? You do if you shut this off 15 minutes ago, you do you. I support you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for joining us on the Remedial Film Class Podcast. As always, you can find us at facebook.com/remedialfilmpod. We'll be back next week with Primal Fear.
Here we go. Here's our post-credits footage. Predict the end of this movie.
Yeah, tell us what you think
Oof.
happened, George.
I don't know and I don't care.
He's looking at me like I don't think I watched the first hour.
I don't care. I don't know. I don't care.
I don't care. All right, so you turned it off when he was finding teeth on the beach
Yeah.
and blood splatter.
Mm-hmm.
Finish the movie. Guess it.
And guess why we have to see his dick?
Yeah.
Like, in what context does the Baconator get out?
You found Mr. Winky.
I don't know. I mean, does he get his
Finkel is not Einhorn.
does he get seduced by his the criminal that he's trying to locate?
Nev Campbell?
Matt Dillon?
She's the dead one.
She's dead.
Yeah, Matt Dillon. Just kidding. No.
Oh,
That
like-
would have been like transgressive.
That would have been interesting for the
Man.
time. Yeah.
That didn't happen until
That would happen today.
Brokeback Mountain. That was when that became
would be-
acceptable in movies.
Although they do kind of imply that.
Here?
Not a sexual seduction, but they imply. Should we just tell him?
No,
Yeah,
I
just tell
think
him.
we just tease him. Get him as interested as possible and then cut him off.
He's not going to watch.
I know.
I'm not going to.
So that's the
He's
thing.
belligerent.
I can 100% live the rest of my life not knowing the end of this movie. 100%.
It's interesting, though. But I understand.
You know, the worst part about not finishing the movie, George,
What's up?
is that you learn.
You don't get to see Nev Campbell naked. No, good.
you learn who the real Mark in the story was, who the person that like got taken for the worst ride, and you're never gonna know. And that's a shame. Like the ending, who wins, who loses, that's interesting, sort of. But like, who really is the victim of all this, and who got taken for the longest ride? That's the interesting part, and we just can't talk about it.
Yeah, and the benefactor of it all.
Now, what we can talk about is in the unrated cut, and I imagine that's what they had streaming for you, the amount of that pool boy that you were able to see under Teresa Russell was, for me, the most shocking part of this movie. Because that's the thing they are usually very particular about framing wise. And in this movie, they're just like, hey, something's there.
I watched it on demand. I think Showtime on demand. I don't think I got that part.
It was a lot of, I mean, it was probably like in a sock or whatever they do, but I mean, it was a substantial amount of him was visible for multiple frames where you're just like, wow, that's not what I expected out of a Hollywood movie. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
Can I just tell him?
No.
He's not going to go.
I know.
He's not going to watch it.
I don't want him to, I just want it to be a thing. You know, on his deathbed in 70 years, he's going to be like, oh.
He's going to be like,
God, I hope I live that long. He clearly said to blave.
Which means to bluff. Which means you
probably lost the bet. And,
Liar!
So good.
Liar! Get back, witch.
I'm not a witch. I'm your wife. But after what I just heard, I'm not sure I want to be that anymore.
Humperdinck.